There's 4 recognized tribes. As most people know, that I had a big task as being chief. I was elected in 2010, and we got recognition in 2011 legally by the government to say we're actually alive and real. Just that we're the only race of people that have to be recognized by the European government in order to be legally considered Indian in the United States. So, in 2010, after I got elected, I said, well, how do we feed our people? We have no money. All of our land was taken from us traditionally, so we have no agricultural land. We have no income or source of revenue to help feed our people. So, and we have one of the highest health disparities, and we're one of the most impoverished people in New England. So how do we feed our people? So I had to come up with a way of working in partnership. I figured, well, we helped the Pilgrims when they came over, learn how to grow a crop. Why can't maybe they can help us as well, if they don't mind? So I started working with European people, farmers that have been given land and other things traditionally. And I'm going to show you what that model looks like. I want to thank Keira and Brian. They have been awesome in supporting our tribe. They have the same goals and missions, so I understand when they said they started with nothing and they had to sell their car and they had no land and they had nothing but bison. 3 years ago, bison were dropped onto our lap because the farm was getting rid of them, and we said we'd take them to help try to grow them and feed our people. And then we started partnering with Keira and another farm up in Vermont to kind of grow bison and see where we could take it. And I figured worst case scenario, if we couldn't afford it, you eat them or sell them. And then your problem goes away, right? So why not give it a whirl? This is our bison herd right here up in Vermont. We have about probably 15 now. They had about 7 calves. We have about 35 here. You can see some of them right here near the road. That's okay, great. So anyway, I'm going to introduce our food program. So we're the Mohegan tribe. We feed people, just under 1,000 people a month from the Canadian border all the way down to Kentucky, New Hampshire. We have 1 big food shelf and 3 distribution sites. This gentleman right here, Darryl Peasley, is responsible in New Hampshire for having food distributed out of his house. And like I said, the farmers, they donate a lot of food to us as well as helping us with the farm. So next slide, please. So we took a 3-pronged approach to food security. Like I said, having no land and no agricultural land and no way to feed our people. Well, traditionally, we didn't look at ownership, we looked at stewardship. So our people would go out onto the land and gather blueberries or gather, mushrooms or forage for food to get also food, medicines, harness material. So one of the first approaches is how do we get access to land that's not ours? Well, you start working with people like the Agency of Natural Resources, the federal government, local farmers, other people who have land and allow you access to their property to be able to go out and harvest natural foraging foods. Our second was garden crops. Okay, we have seeds, ancient indigenous seeds, that you guys won't even know. Like we have Montpelier squash, we have flint corn, we have Abenaki rose corn. So we said, how can we grow food without any places, and how do we propagate our seeds and keep them growing when we don't have any place? So I started working with farmers to say, would you grow our crops? You get to eat some of the produce and learn what it is, but we get the seeds back and also some of the produce. So then we started working with farmers on that. Meat production, wild game, bison. Trying to help feed our people. We also get roadkill from the Fish and Wildlife, good roadkill. Like moose that might get hit or by a car, or if they have to take out a bear because they're starting to destroy people's garbage or something. So we take that meat and we distribute it to our people. There's been a few down here in New Hampshire that we've recaptured and given to our people, as well as Vermont. The Department of Transportation or the road crew kind of helps us out a little bit. So that's our three-legged stool of our food system. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So how do we deal with our garden crops and our partnerships? I started working with Sterling College, which is an agricultural college, and they knew a lot about the techniques of growing food. So I asked them if they would partner with us because they had the technical, we had the traditional way of growing food. They had the knowledge of soil sciences and technology and gene, analyzing genes and all these kind of things. So they agreed to become our seed bank. So we've started our first Three Sisters gardens there, corn, beans, and squash. And they grew our crops. We educated the students on our stories and how we grow crops and how one puts nitrogen in and one takes it out, and how our stories about how we get the crops, and also the Three Sisters, and how the cultural piece ends. We would educate the students on that, and they get to try some of the food, and so everybody wins, and they help save our seeds along with us. So we started working with Sterling College first, and then we moved on to Middlebury College because it was so successful. And then we went to the UVM Horticultural Farm, which is also working not only with native crops, but CSA foods during the summer, because a lot of these other ones are fall crops, and then we got the CSA summer crops. And then we work with the Border Farm, which does work for USDA and their seed banks, the USDA seed banks, and we take that corn, we grind it in our corn mill and make cornmeal. So we have a cornmeal product for our people, so we can provide them so they can make traditional corn products like corn bread or cornmeal or whatever they need. Then we also partnered with NOFA Vermont. So those are the colleges. Then we started partnering with NOFA, who we've kind of taken it over from that, and we started working. We had 65 commercial and partner farmers to grow our crops. So we had some commercial that would do acres of beans for us, and then there would be some that were just local farmers, and they had like 5 rows of corn. They didn't mind putting in another line of corn, because whether they had 5 or 6 lines of corn, they didn't care. But if you have 50 people putting in a 150-foot row of corn, now you've got quite a bit of corn, right? So my work was working with these different farmers to provide what they could to help grow our food. That's including here in New Hampshire. We work with people here to help grow our crops, also in Vermont. And then at the end, like August 10th up in Vermont, we're doing a green corn harvest ceremony. So we have a harvest ceremony of it's a little early for taking the crops, but that was the only time it would fit in. And we do our traditional green corn ceremony with a dance and a story about how crops came to us. And so we're educating our farmers and the public on helping of what they're growing, what they're tasting. They can now understand from a cultural standpoint what that means to us. Because we don't see seeds as something just in front of you. We say, when we look at a seed, we don't see just a seed. We see that thousands of our ancestors had to have taken care of that seed in order for it to get into our hands. If anybody would have thrown it away, we wouldn't have it in our hand. So there's a chain of custody from the gift of our Creator to the first Abenaki person to us, because someone had to take care of that seed in order for it to get to us. So that's a huge responsibility that we teach people, is that that's how important it is, right? That chain of custody. So we teach our children, do you put the corn back in the bag? Do you throw it away so it's lost forever? Or what do you do, right? So it's a whole educational experience around seed saving, seed crops, and what they mean to you. If you can move to the next one, please. This was our tribal forest up in Barton, Vermont, 68 acres of land. It's very surprising in the way we do agriculture, how much food you can grow in the middle of a forest. As long as you can mound up the soil, because you're not messing with the roots, you can mound up the soil and it gets sunshine and you can water it. You can grow a lot of food in the middle of the forest without having to clear cut the forest. And this was just some of the example. We had a little area that was grown up, that was a little area of brush hog area that we kind of cleared up. But this is kind of our showing the mound gardens, and you can grow in the middle of a forest, and then we would put these trellises over the top so that way the critters try to stay out of it. And just a word of education around when we have our stories of how corn and tobacco came to us. Tobacco is actually a national offense. So when we grew our tobacco here in New England, we plant tobacco around it, it oozes the nicotine out of the plant. So deer won't eat it because it's like throwing 10 nicotine patches on their arm. They're not going to chew on it because they go, whoa. And then the flowers are not sticky, but so the bugs can pollinate it, but any of the Japanese beetles or anything that lands on the plant will get stuck there. So it's kind of like a natural, like people use marigolds in their garden. So tobacco is one of those natural products that helps protect your garden. And we use it in ceremony. Go ahead, next slide, please. You've seen how plants are growing, so I'm not going to bore you on this. Go ahead, next one, please. So these are some of the different things we tried. Like these are the Three Sisters gardens that we tried planting in the middle of the forest. We did learn a few lessons because we weren't there to ask all of our ancestors. We knew corn, beans, and squash grew together. And we know that our corn here is about 4 feet high, matures about 65 days. Our pole beans are very aggressive. And as you can see, they can engulf a corn stalk pretty quickly. So we learned that you had the corn in the center, but you had to move the beans out a little ways, just so it would still kiss the corn as part of our stories, but it wouldn't engulf it. And then you had the squash that you go around the outside to keep the critters, because squash is very picky. So that's how that whole process is. So we did some trials on saying, okay, how do we do that? This is some tobacco right here that's growing. And of course the beans are growing up the stalks, and this is inside of the forest. Go ahead, next slide. And we did some other experiments on, okay, how do we use fencing for the beans? What's the most efficient way? Because we don't have any agricultural land, and forest really isn't something that you can use all the time, right? It's a good experiment, but we need it on a scale. I have 2,000 citizens I feed, right? So you can't do it on a few mounds inside of a forest, even though traditionally you could grow it where you live. But we had to find some other ways to try to, what's the best way to produce as much as we can? And you can see some of those pole beans are pretty aggressive, grow right up the stalk. Go ahead, next slide. This is our variety of corn. We have a callus flint corn, which that's commercial, and you mix it together. It looks a little bit like Christmassy. So, I mean, it makes it look pretty when you're cooking it. Our co-op corn, 4 inches high, highly packed in nutrition. It kind of will bind up your cornmeal because it's got a lot of oil in it. And that's what our traditional corn is. Like I said, when you hear the historical accounts of corn being grown on acres of land near the riverbeds, that was what they were talking about, was our co-op corn. And like I said, you could almost do 2 crops in 1 year because it takes 65 days to mature. And it's very, very small though. Abenaki rose, that's a white corn and red. It's another type of flint. We got our popcorn, and then we have the little Gaspé. Farthest north you can go, Gaspé, Maine. It's like a weed. It goes about 2 feet high and goes sideways. And you can only, and they're little tiny things, but you will never find corn growing up much further than that. So that's another traditional corn of ours. Go ahead, please. Pod corn. I found this pod corn in Brian Schenver, one of our tribal historic preservation officers. This corn was documented in 1902, the last time that I saw in the Boston Globe and the New York Herald. This is when we do our green corn ceremonies, we wear this as part of our ceremony. I call it dragon scale corn. Every kernel has a husk. This is the closest you're going to get to grass. Like, you know how grain, you have grain and it has a seed inside the husk? Every one of the kernels has a husk. It's called pod corn. Really ancient corn. The first corn that comes right from growing from a grass to a corn. We're growing that. We found some in the seed bank and we started growing them again. We had 2 years. I got 2 years from a seed bank in Massachusetts, and we found this document with the Abenaki Indian tribe, and that we wore it at annual tribal gatherings, and that the grain is sacred. and that we fastened it obviously to our wear. So that's the documented version that Europeans documented. That's the actual corn. And the cool thing is that the same cob can grow different colors. So if you open them up, sometimes they're like Indian corn that you see as Indian corn, various colors. Then there's some that are solid purple, solid like red and white, and then white. It's amazing, amazing stuff. Go ahead, next one, please. So this is kind of our harvest. We harvest it at the end of the year. We work with commercial people to help have a place to dry it. This is our flint corn. We have this machine we suck it through. If you guys deal with corn, look at a thing called the Tornado. It's awesome. It's like $300. You whip it through there in 2 seconds, your corn shoots right through it, drops the kernels, and the cob shoots right out the other side. Amazing product. If you ever try to shot this by hand, you would appreciate it. So we gather up all of our seed, and we can store the seed for a long time, but once you grind it, it lasts about 6 months once you grind it. So we try to leave it whole until we're ready to grind. Next one, please. Next slide. This is our cornmeal called skimon. Skimon is the Abenaki word for cornmeal. So it's like a double cornmeal. So, and this is our logo. We use it, we package it, for our citizens, put it on the shelf so they can come and get it, and then make cornbread, whatever they want. And then we're hoping someday that if we can find a market for it, we can pay farmers to grow our corn, and then we grind it and then sell it to like the co-ops and other things, because it's a wonderful tasting corn. It's awesome corn. Next slide, please. These are beans, skunk beans, true cranberry beans. This is skunk bean. If anybody commercial English one was like orca beans, it's a black and white bean. There are documents of history where we would wear them around our neck and hunting parties, and if you would go for 3 days, and if you didn't get any game, you could break your necklace and create a bean soup and get you another 3 days to get back to your tribe. Most parties would only go out no more than 3 days and then come back. I have some examples in the Burlington International Airport of the beans being on courgettes. I have an original 1700s courgette from Hudson Bay Company that was gifted to me a long time ago. And it has the beans on it, and then the French decided to do glass trade beads that mimicked it when we became more stationary, more farmers. And so you have Vermont True Cranberry beans and Norwich Rock. The Marfacs are excellent baked beans. And then, you know, like I said, Jacob's cattle is pretty well known too. There's a lot, they come out of Maine. Go ahead, next one. So these are the beans, obviously. We harvest them and we let them dry in the vine. Next one, please. This is what a skunk bean looks like. True cranberry. And Joe Bison, the guy from the Vermont Bean Crafters, he has this thresher. We used to have children, you know, open them up and take the beans out, right? Give the kids something to do. He's got this thresher. You jump it in, it'll shake it down, and the beans fall out, and then all the waste dumps out. Wonderful machine. The thing about some Europeans that we love, man, they were very they had a lot of ingenuity. So you can appreciate the mechanical engineering and stuff around these things, right? People would rather work smarter than harder. And that's the same with us. We would take anything that was European and make it our own, like this coat, this vest. Well, we beaded it to make it ours, but we didn't have to make the vest. Go ahead. Our squash, that is an Algonquin squash. That'll last until January in a cool place. So that squash will last a long time. It's kind of more of a pie kind of squash. And then you have the Penobscot pumpkin, which is an offshoot of it. They're basically pie type big, because some of those can get 15 pounds, right? I mean, you give somebody that's a senior, and him and his wife there, and you're gonna do, what am I gonna do with a 15-pound squash? Like, I can only eat so much, right? One year we had 3,000 pounds, and they were like, okay, we've had enough squash. And then Connecticut field pumpkins are wonderful pie pumpkins. They're just so delicious. I always get recommended to cook our pies at Thanksgiving and our celebrations, because they turn out really well. White scallop squash, that's pretty commercial. That's one of our traditional ones. You cut it up real thin and you can drying or dehydrating or cooking. Next squash. This is an East Montpelier squash. This is sort of like a Blue Hubbard, but it's our version of a Blue Hubbard. It's small, and they actually crossed with a Blue Hubbard. It took us 5 seasons to uncross it, so that way most of our stuff now is the natural product. Because if you take something and just always keep what you want, the characteristics of it, eventually those are the only things that are going to show up, right? You still might have a Blue Hubbard trace somewhere, but you're going to back breed it out. And this again, some of our tribal forest gardens. Go ahead. You can see we had we had several thousand pounds of squash. That's what the inside looks like. And we take this squash, we process it, and we distribute it through our food shelf. Like I said, we're feeding just under 1,000 people a month. We've got 700 people in Northeast Kingdom. I'm doing stuff out of Shelburne, Burlington area. We have another place in Brattleboro that we're feeding people out of, and then in Kentucky, New Hampshire, we feed the southern part of our people. That's one of the big bulls. He wasn't too happy. Unfortunately, you can see that he actually he had gored one of the younger ones. One of the younger ones got the chute at the same time, and he got mad and took out his frustrations on it, and that animal had to be put down. But he wasn't very happy, and he come out of that chute. The one in Vermont, the farm that was up there that we got the bison from, was a really high-end bison farm. They have all the hydraulic, mechanical stuff. They didn't spare any expense, but back then they had the money for that, and then it's gone through several phases. So the equipment's still there, it's just the original owners aren't there. Brian and Keira used to help consult on that. They still do our bison up there, but even previous owners, they were up there helping to consult with that. And this is our food, meat production. Obviously, we teach our youth some of that people might not like, but we do live off the land. We do eat what we catch, and we do, whether it be raccoon or whether it be deer or bear or moose, whatever, we're going to feed our people with whatever meat sources we traditionally ate. And we still live that lifestyle. We are really connected to our food source. We harvest it ourselves, we process it, and we distribute it. So it's people are up and personal and respect the animal because they know where their food comes from, because they've been involved with it. Next slide, please. Herd management. This is some of the areas we're up there tagging some of the cows and doing some of the worming and testing for pregnancies, and obviously bringing in some of the hays. Most of the time we're feeding them the 400-pound bales, the 4x6. They go through probably one every 2 days. We dump a couple of them out, and I think we went through over 100 bales last year. Next slide, please. As I said, we're into our meat production. We slaughter them on farm. We hoist them up. We bring them, we quarter them, bring them to the butcher, and then we go bring them right to our freezer. So from the start to the end, we're very involved with our food system. Go ahead, please. So, traditional natural gathering of nuts, berries. Anybody know what kind of mushroom that is? There you go. Yep. So, some people cut them into steaks. You got to get them before the bugs get underneath them. But we work with land trusts, the Agency of Natural Resources, state parks and recs. We have access in Vermont, access to lands that we actually can go and gather on. We have permission, so we don't have to ask or get arrested for trespassing. So that's part of our land access agreements. Next slide, please. Again, that's where the skunk beans were used. That's an actual 1700 Hudson Bay gorget. And the skunk beans, and you can tell this is the traditional skunk beans, and then when the French found out that we became more sedentary, they started replicating it with glass beads, so that way we have to replace them. But these are the necklaces we put around our neck to go and hunt and then break them to make soup. So obviously if you sweat, you're not going to have them for too long, right? So here's some of our corn and our gourds. So we have historical and modern uses for these. Next slide, please. And you please visit us at AbenakItribe.org. That is the Mohegan Band website. You can learn there's historical videos. There's our history, there's our food programs, you can learn a lot. I have pamphlets over there about our food programs. Also, I have my card if anybody ever needs to contact me if they need anything. We have posters over there, please feel free to take that. One thing I did tell in the New Hampshire area, the big table there, we're doing cider. Daryl Peasley here is in charge. We got our sugar house and our cider mill over there. And we do cider in the fall and maple syrup in the spring, and we feed out of there. So we have a lot going on in New Hampshire and in Vermont. And there's a bag over there. I put my pipe bag over there. Before we had beads, we would take porcupine quill and we would dye them and make our decoration into our clothing. So before we had beads, that bag is decorated with porcupine quills. So I just asked, don't open the bag because that's my pipe. But you can look at the bag and it's made, decorated 100% with porcupine quills from local porcupines that we would either throw blankets over and take their quills, or if they unfortunately died on the road, we would take their quills and then we'd dye them and make a quill work. So you're not going to see very much of that around. So I brought it just so people can see. Go ahead. Any questions? I don't know what time I'm done here, so it's 11:16. Not sure when if that's up right now. Okay.
I'm not in charge.
If you have questions, I'll be here all day. Just approach me and pop in and ask me some questions. But like I said, thank you for supporting these two wonderful people here, because they're great and they care a lot about the community, but they also care about the disadvantaged populations, the Abenaki people. So it takes a lot of heart with people like yourself to be able to help others with the resources you have, so thank you. We have 4,000 to 6,000 Abenaki people, I would say. Our tribe is one of the largest recognized tribes. We have over 2,000. You have similar amounts in the Siskoy, the northern parts of Vermont. Because you got to understand, all the people pushed everybody north. When people started coming in from the south, they pushed everybody north. And then there's some small other pockets. There's the Colasuk, which is a couple hundred people, and there's the Elmu and Brattleboro, about 100. We have a few tribes here in New Hampshire, but they're not legally recognized as Indian tribes. But I'm not saying they're not. They're just not legally recognized by the government. And some probably have worked with some of those tribes, the Colasuk and the Pennacook and another Abenaki tribe. So, and then you got two recognized in Canada by the federal government of Canada. So I would say 4,000 to 6,000 in New England overall that are on tribal rolls. There's many more that could be, but it's not great to be indigenous because people sometimes think we're dead or we should have all died or whatever. We're not always welcome. It's kind of a tough place. So, but it's all good. We're moving forward and educating, and thank you for the question. Anybody else? Or are we all?
Thanks, Don. That's great. We're good.
Thank you, Keira. Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, I don't have slides for you. I don't know if we want to put up a pretty picture of a bison or something. So yes, I'm with Land for Good, which is a nonprofit that works directly in the 6 New England states. We do also work a bit nationally, doing some education for other service providers, sometimes in person, but also online. Our direct technical assistance involves a few different kinds of programs, which I'll tell you about a bit today. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about me and how excited I am to be here. I actually used to live in the Andor Forest at the property that was owned by Amy Buckner and Bob Keener is owned by them, and loved it. This is a really special area, and I'm excited to be here today with all of you. I actually moved to New England wanting to start a venison farm because I wanted to do something alternative, so I have not done that, but I'm really excited at all of the bison ranchers and growers that are here. And I'd love to, get a feel for who is here. How many of you are farmers? Awesome. And are you all farming bison? Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, I have some notes, but so at Land for Good, we help people who are looking for farmland gain access to farmland, and that can be through a variety of different tenure methods, from leasing to owning or anything in between. We also help with succession and transfer planning, which is a vital part of keeping land in farming. And we work with landowners who are interested in leasing their land to farmers, as well as providing training opportunities for other service providers. So of the people here who are farmers, how many of you own your land? And is anybody here leasing? Cool, we got a whole spread. So I'll tell you a bit about when we're offering direct technical assistance for folks who are looking for land, how we kind of work through whether leasing or owning is the right choice. So we have a lot of resources on our website, some of which I have over here for you to look through. And one of the main publications that we use is called Farm Access Methods Guide. And it takes you through what we call the bundle of sticks or bundle of rights, which is how your rights transfer depending on the type of tenure that you have and those securities that are involved within that. So a lot of this is dependent on your business plan, what you can afford, what your business can afford, and any future projections for the business. And when you're owning land, then if you're a sole ownership, you have the most rights, but there's also certain disadvantages to ownership as well. And then you go down the spectrum, maybe you have a partnership of ownership and you own it with multiple people or multiple entities. And then you can get into lease to own, which is a little bit more permanent than a typical lease, at least as far as transferring those rights down the line. There's also licensing and permitting for farming, which is probably the least secure, but definitely flexible. So what are some advantages to ownership? And I'd love this to be a little bit, interactive. So feel free to shout out, what are some advantages to ownership of land?
You don't have to ask permission.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What else?
Stability.
Mm-hmm. Can build equity. Collateral. Sometimes there's certain programs or that you need to own in order to access, or if you want to leverage your property to purchase something else. How about some disadvantages?
You have to pay for it.
Yeah. Responsibility, right? Anything else? So on the flip side of that, what are some advantages to leasing? Flexibility, maybe? And especially if you're starting out and don't, know exactly what you're doing. Sometimes it's nice to not get in too deep and have the opportunity to try and then move on to something else.
So you have some tax advantages?
Tax advantages? Sure, yeah. For both even maybe, right? Like if you own, you get the current use tax or have it in agricultural. How about some disadvantages to leasing?
It could be unstable if somebody decides to sell.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you can't access some of the programs that are around, or if you do, you need to have the landowner be very involved and have direct written permission that you are leasing the land in order to access some of those programs. Sometimes building equity is difficult. There are ways to build equity in a lease, but it can be a little bit tricky, especially when it comes time to end that lease. Yeah, so a lot of, disadvantages and advantages to both, and it really just depends on the operation. So we really help people work through that and make sure that it's going to be a good fit. And we also help with land evaluation and seeing, is this property going to be the right fit for what you're trying to do? What kinds of places can you look for farmland? So we really try and prepare people, because it's one of the biggest risks to losing farmland can also be when people get onto farmland and then decide it's not for them, especially if they bought it, and then they're out really quickly and there's a high turnover rate. And the flip side of that is really working with people who are already farming and need to develop a succession or transfer plan. So of those of you that are currently farming, does anybody have a succession or transfer plan? Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, most farmers don't. As farming, like a lot of people, we love it so much that we think we're gonna die with our boots on, and that attitude just is beautiful, resilient, but also dangerous, and if there's not a plan in place, then what happens if suddenly you have major medical expenses that you need to pay for and you don't have retirement or money set aside for those expenses, and your body's at the point where you can't be out running around lifting heavy things and such. And I think a really beautiful part of having a succession plan in place early on is that there can be a transfer of skills and a transfer of knowledge that can get lost if it has to be a sudden sale. And also the pressures of development come into play with that. If you don't have time to find a farmer to take over the operation, then it runs the risk of being sold to development or going onto the open market, and somebody who's not interested in farming might come along and take that and make it into an estate. So just land holding even, consolidation, which we were talking about earlier. So we try and help farmers put together these succession and transfer plans, which can be very complicated and usually emotionally fraught. People have a certain way they like doing things, and even if there is a successor identified, working through how do you transfer management throughout the course of a succession, going through the process of that. So we help facilitate with a lot of communications, and we help get the team of people together. There's asset transfers and the management transfers, 7 different pieces really: retirement planning, estate planning, business planning. Is your farm viable enough to support 2 incomes? During a successful transfer with someone who's going to be taking over the business as it's currently existing, the farm needs to be able to support the existing farmer and an incoming farmer. So how do you do that? And is there housing available? Housing can be a really big issue for any kind of farming situation, whether somebody who's already owning it or somebody coming in wanting to lease the land. And so trying to really think ahead before it gets to the point where you need to have things in place is important. So we do a lot of education directly with folks on these issues, and we help craft leases and go through the different methods that I was mentioning beforehand, and we facilitate a lot of those interactions. With the succession planning, we host a few different workshops scattered throughout the year, and we're really trying to expand into New Hampshire specifically. It's been kind of a harder audience to reach in New Hampshire. As I was mentioning, a lot of existing farmers, you get so busy, it's hard to think about doing management and retirement planning. And so we're trying to maybe look at programming that's going to involve the incoming generation a bit more. I think oftentimes they're the ones that have some of the extra energy to be like, I want to create a stable situation for myself, and so I'm going to go look for help. And sometimes the older or the retiring or exiting farmers don't have that mindset because they've been doing it for a long time. So figuring out how we can reach the younger generation to make sure that these plans and these transfers are happening smoothly. Of the farmers who are here, how many of you are first generation farmers? You started it yourself? Yeah. And how many, are there any like legacy farmers? Your parents were farmers and you're kind of moving through the tradition of that? May I ask how you developed your succession transfer plan? How long have you had that in place?
I
foundation?
And then the deal with it.
Okay, it's all conserved, part of a foundation.
I'm on the board of a land trust for years.
That's great. Working with land trusts is really, really helpful, especially creating succession and transfer plans or selling your farm or making it accessible.
I'm the 14th generation.
14th generation. Wow. Where's your farm?
I'm on it.
Long Island. Wow. And that's an area that's high pressure to development.
You bet.
Yeah. Wow, that's impressive. 14 generations. Well, that's a great example, you know, to have that in place and make sure it's going to continue on. We really recommend even people who are starting out farming start thinking about a succession and transfer plan right away so that you can keep it in farming. And easements do help with that, and if you need to protect it in perpetuity, and if there is also even a sale happening, then the easements can kind of help with the sale of a property. So lots of tools that we have for that. Make sure I'm covering everything. So even within leasing, there's a lot of different types of leases that work for people. I know, Keira and Brian are leasing the Pitcher Mountain Farm from the Andor Forest, and sometimes leases are really formal written documents, sometimes they're handshake agreements, and it really just depends on what works for the person. One of my colleagues at Land for Good is a hay farmer and has 18 different handshake agreements with folks, which is a lot to manage, and that was another disadvantage of leasing. You have to manage relationships, which can take up a lot of time and energy. And normally we recommend folks to have a written lease agreement because that provides more stability and security for the farmer. But sometimes handshake agreements work. In Jay's case, if one of those agreements falls through, there's 16 more to rely on, and he owns the hay equipment, so there's not really a lot of risk in infrastructure loss. So when you get into a longer term lease, there can be a rolling lease. Does anybody know what a rolling lease is? It's a kind of nice hybrid between a short-term lease and a longer-term lease, providing a lot of security. If you have a 5-year rolling lease, at the end of year 1, you still have 5 more years to carry out that lease. And at the end of year 3, there's still 5 more years should you decide to terminate the lease. So it provides a sense of security for the farmer that this property is maybe not working out for me, but I have 5 years to transition out if I want to. Same for the landowner. And even in purchasing, people are coming up with really creative ways to purchase farmland right now because it's so hard to get onto farmland, especially if you are coming into it as a first generation with limited resources or limited support and really want to start farming. A lot of people try and find an older generation retiring farmer who's interested in passing their farm on, but that can take years, and then you kind of end up with some generational differences too, or this, younger generations coming in with all this energy and drive, and maybe not as much humility and humble attitude that the older generation has put their entire lives into something and building something. There can be a clash of generational communication styles, and that's another thing we are trying to develop some programming to look at, because we want to make sure that people are meeting each other and coming into all of this with respect so that we can make sure farming stays in farming. And so that leads me to our upcoming workshops that we have happening. In the winter, we hold a succession school in Massachusetts, and we switch locations around. So last year's was in Pittsfield. I'm not sure where this year is going to be yet, but it's a whole series, and people who are trying to create succession transfer plans can come and bring the younger generation, and we can work on plans together. And that's been really successful. I'd love to see something like that in New Hampshire. We don't have anything quite yet, but we are trying to, as I said, host an event that's specifically targeting the incoming generation. And this year is our 20th anniversary at Land for Good. We've been around for a long time. The Faulkners actually worked a bit with us way back when we first started, and we're continuing to grow and expand our programming, and we will be having the 20th celebration September 25th. So if you are in the New England area, hold the date on your calendars. And in Maine, we have an exciting workshop coming up as well. That's going to be a workshop on assessing and leasing land in Brunswick. That's on the 31st. And we have a planning for the future of your farm workshop in Great Barrington coming up September 5th. And as I said, I have a table over here with a bunch of resources on there, and we have a lot of downloads. We have over 70 publications on our website, including webinars and YouTube videos. A lot of information which pertains to the whole country, so you don't have to be in New England for these materials. We have different resources on leasing, some of the topics that I was talking about earlier today, how to decide which one is the right fit for you. We have collaboration, purchasing land collaboratively. We have resources on creating your own leases. We have a lot of information for landowners who are interested in leasing their land, and also information for other service providers. I know there's some service providers here, and we're really trying to provide some educational materials for folks to do some of the work that we are doing, especially with succession and transfer planning. And so definitely check that out and let me know if you have any questions. I think I'm not filling my whole time, but I'm sure that other people will. So thank you for having me here.
Hello, so my name is Mike Greene. I work at the Farm Service Agency office. We're located in Walpole, New Hampshire, and service Cheshire and Sullivan counties. We're in Cheshire County right now. So at NRCS, so FSA is one of the USDA agencies. We're an agricultural service provider. We work closely with NRCS, with people who hear from them. But I want to talk today mostly about disaster assistance programs, especially in New Hampshire the past couple of years. I know we've had a lot of flooding, droughts. We've had tornadoes 2 years in a row in some places in Cheshire County. So I just want to make everyone aware of different programs that are available should you have like an emergency disaster. We've even had economic emergency programs with COVID and how that affected markets. I'm not going to read this word for word to you. I don't think anyone wants to hear that, but I will put it up on the screen just for a little bit so you can read through it. The gist is that USDA works with everybody, regardless of demographic, regardless of category. We provide, we lend, we do services, we hire. Just real briefly, just to kind of cover FSA a little bit. We have a lot of good online resources, whether on FSA's site itself or on farmers.gov. We're really pushing beginning farmers. We're really pushing getting new people in that we haven't worked with before. So we have a ton of different resources. I know you can't, I don't think you guys have received the PowerPoint, so you can't click it, but it's really easy to find. If you just go to farmers.gov, they have all these resources for us. You can find your local service center. You can find your beginning farmer coordinator who will help set you up, help you find your office, help you get onboarded. So they really are making it easy for digital these days. They're trying to make it so as many people as possible can access the services that are available to them. And one really interesting aspect about FSA that makes it different from any other federal agency is that we're actually led by local farmers. We have elections every year when we break our counties into what are called local administrative areas. And farmers basically are allowed to vote on their representatives who actually serve as my supervisor. They have some program oversight, they approve applications, they help us come up with ideas on like what a reasonable price is for something in the state. So that's a really cool aspect of FSA. So there's not a lot of federal agencies that are actually led by the people they serve. And it's actually election season right now, so if you guys want to talk to your local office, they are looking for candidates. I know not everyone here is from New Hampshire, but these are where our different offices are located. I said I'm at Walpole, so you can see Cheshire Sullivan down there at the southwest. And then we have 4 other service centers in the state office and a farm loan office. FSA kind of does a really large swath of different programs. I'm going to focus on the disaster assistance today, but we do have a few conservation programs, safety net programs, risk management like crop insurance. There's half of us do farm loans, which have beginning farmers, emergency loans. We do a lot. You're going to hear from Tabitha later from NRCS. They're a little more specialized, but we have a pretty wide swath of programs we administer to different farmers. And these are the 5 disaster programs I want to focus on today. These are the ones that could be applicable to different livestock farmers. I know we're talking about bison today, but these are applicable to most livestock. So whether you're diversified or whether you just have, cows or chickens, these may be applicable. And then they can be split up into the different ways that they make payments. So some are just direct payments. If you have a loss, if you're undergoing a certain disaster scenario, we'll just calculate out the payment based on your number of livestock, your acreage, etc., and be able to just make a direct payment to you based on certain established factors. Some are cost share, so that's where if there's an emergency that causes physical damage, perhaps you guys would put the effort in to restore your cropland, your fencing, and then we pay back after to help cover the cost of restoration. And then there's risk management, which is the most proactive of the 3 kinds of disaster programs. A lot of these you don't really plan for a flood coming and wiping out, your hay barn or something, or your hay in the barn or something like that. So you can't plan ahead for it. But the risk management is kind of like crop insurance, where you do sign up ahead of time. So the first one is called LIP. It's called the Livestock Indemnity Program. And one thing I will say right off the bat is a lot of these programs aren't things you're going to be signing up for every year. A lot of these programs are ones you're not going to want to sign up for because it's just been a disaster or an emergency. So they're more as needed. So there's not always like a rolling sign up you have to keep in mind every year. But LIP covers if there was an event that caused mortality of your livestock in excess of normal amounts. So think if like excessive heat with the chickens, maybe if a lot of them perish because of excessive heat. If there's blizzards, tornadoes, hurricanes, attacks by animals were introduced into the wild. That's not something so much in New Hampshire, and then there's also an aspect of it where it can assist with the sale of livestock that you have to reduce the price on because of injury. So this is one that we actually haven't had to administer in our counties in a long time, but it is just something to keep in mind. We're fortunate that we haven't had to, but if like the tornado that we had this year or last went through and caused some mortality, if we had a really bad hailstorm or a hurricane or lightning storm, fire. And this is one of the direct ones I was telling you about. So it just has a per head factor for livestock. You tell us how many of your livestock died, how big your herd is. It would have to exceed standard mortality. So I know that I think earlier in the Keira mentioned how livestock get stuck in feeding apparatuses sometimes. It doesn't so much cover those incidental situations, but it does cover large-scale mortality events to make payments to help cover the loss and restock. Livestock Forage Disaster Program, LFP. That's a program that helps cover pasture losses and grazing losses during eligible droughts and fires. Again, fire is not one that we so much worry about out here. I think it has to be on non-federal grazing land. But yeah, so during drought, so an example would be like in 2022, we had a pretty bad drought in Cheshire County. So we were able to make payments to livestock grazers who were having to buy in feed, having to move them around more, and just kind of like, it's a way to just give a little extra money to cover those costs. There are some programs where you have to demonstrate the exact kind of loss you had and have to show us that the money is going to cover that, but LFP is not like that. You just tell us how many animals you have, how many acres you have, and there's a payment calculated based on your per head or your per acre. If it's made directly to you to help you cover any financial burdens you really had because of that during the given drought.
How old is he?
And I guess one thing to keep in mind, because it did confuse some people in 22, is the drought has to be an official drought on the U.S. Drought Monitor, which doesn't always correspond perfectly to on-the-ground conditions, but it is an eligibility requirement. ELAP, Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish. This is another program that LFP and ELAP are very similar. There's a lot of overlap between them, at least when it comes to grazing losses, but ELAP is a little bit broader. So last year we had a lot of moisture, a lot of rain, and people's hay was either literally being washed down river from flooding or just incredibly poor quality. Their pastures were diminished. They couldn't even get their cows on them because they were so muddy they would just tear them up if they had to get out there. So if people were buying hay in above normal quantities, for instance, we can provide reimbursement on that. We can do water hauling during droughts if you're having to haul water to your livestock to a feedlot or water. I think there's some disease options too. Those aren't ones we worry about too much in New Hampshire, but like cattle tick fever. ELAP has a really wide variety of different loss categories. We can even do, if your feed gets destroyed, I've been mentioning tornadoes, but flooding too. If a flood comes in and washes away your round bales off the field or something like that, we can reimburse on that. I am going to tie each of these together again too. I'm just trying to give a very brief overview of each, but then there's the Emergency Conservation Program. That's one that actually deals with physical damage on your farm, on your cropland, pasture land, or some eligible farm structures. So a good example would be like debris removal. If you have riverside land and you have a flood come through and a bunch of boulders and stones and trees get left on it, it's pretty expensive to clean up and repair. So we can provide cost share to actually get that off the field and restore it to pre-disaster conditions. In windstorms, if some trees come down and damage your fencing, whether electric or permanent wooden, we can help replace that. We do all sorts. We can do regrading. If you have a flood and it tears up your pasture, we can help regrade it and get it back to pre-disaster conditions. We can even do some stuff with like waterways, and we can do wells during a drought. ECP is one that really focuses on trying to get your farm back to how it was before the disaster occurred. So that's one we've actually been doing a lot in New Hampshire lately with a lot of flooding. And you can even do snow removal in the winter now too, if you have to help get your livestock to a feedlot or get them out to feed. And then there's NAP, it's the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program. It's essentially crop insurance. The way it works is that different counties each have their own crops that are covered by crop insurance. So in Cheshire and Sullivan counties, it's mostly just corn and soybeans, but it does vary by county. But the main reason I want to talk about this one is it can also do hay coverage. And in participating counties or participating states, it can even do quality loss, which really helps make the program a bit more viable. In the past, we've had people who, it's been a really bad hay year, but they're still bringing bales in, so it doesn't show a production loss. But just last year, we were able to get approved the quality loss component, where you can actually submit tests to us to show that your RFV went down, and that actually gets factored into the production loss and can actually help payments get made. So we did yeah. So that's a really good component of it. A lot of times, at least in New Hampshire, in these smaller areas, it's hard to make these federal programs fit for the smaller farms, but the quality loss component really does help if you make hay. Makes it a lot easier to substantiate a loss and actually get some fair compensation on your loss if you have to buy in hay to offset it. And one thing I want to touch on is if you file a form, it's called a CCC 860, and that essentially is just our form where you can certify to being what we call a historically underserved producer, whether you're a beginning farmer, socially disadvantaged, a veteran, or limited resource. When you submit that form, you actually get free automatic NAP coverage. That's something that's pretty new within the last couple of years. That doesn't have the buy-up component to it if you were to want the quality loss for your hay. But that is something to keep in mind if anyone is getting signed up with USDA offices and you're new, or if you were a limited resource, veteran, or socially disadvantaged, you can actually get this program free of charge, and then if you elect to buy up to a higher level, it's 50% reduced premiums. It's not so. So I kind of wanted to just put a little thing together to kind of help show the various types of losses that are actually covered for livestock farmers. So I know it's a lot of programs, and I do have the fact sheets over there that go into each of them in more detail, but they really do have a very wide swath of programs at FSA that can help in any kind of loss for the most part. You know, if something happens causing excess animal mortality, it would be the livestock indemnity program. If your pasture land is being diminished in quality because of fire, drought, blizzard, hail, that would be LFP or ELAP. If you're having to haul water or feed, if you're having to transport livestock between pastures more often because of weather conditions, if you're having to buy in hay you wouldn't normally have to because of how the season is going weather-wise, that would be ELAP, the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program. If you're a hay producer yourself and you're having a loss event that's making it so your production and or quality are going down, that would be the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program. And then for physical damage to your crop land, pasture land, or fencing, or an emergency drought assistance, that would be the Emergency Conservation Program. So they split it up. It's not like there's one program for everything for different losses a livestock farmer might undergo, but most categories are covered, whether it's physical damage to your farm, whether it's death to your livestock, to your pasture, to your hay, whether it's just a financial loss from having to buy things in. They do have a very broad program base to assist. And the biggest thing with these disaster programs is communication and documentation. The biggest issue we run into is people calling us and telling us something happened 6 months ago and we can't really help at that point. So the biggest thing would be to just get in contact with your local USDA office if you're interested, set up records and be in their system, and then if something happens, just give them a call. They'll usually want to send someone out just to do like a field walk to verify it. Sometimes they'll send loss adjusters out to third party. But I mean, that's the way with most federal programs, but especially with the disasters, it's just important to communicate and document. And then we also offer emergency loans too. I'll admit I am not a loan person, so this slide was just put in here, but they are something that are available when we get disaster designation. So you can see all the different ways they can be used, and they are pretty flexible. I mean, you can use them for things such as paying essential family living expenses and refinancing certain debts, which is not something you would normally do with the federal loans. So that's someone you would want to talk to the Farm Loan Office for, but they are good to keep in mind. They're usually low interest. I think they're in the 4% range. They're a bit more paperwork than the other disaster programs. You really have to substantiate how much you lost and how the loan is going to cover that, but they are good to keep in mind. Yeah, if you go to fsa.usda.gov or farmers.gov, there's a lot of great resources on there. Some of these programs even have tools online now to help you start applying and getting all your paperwork together before you come into the office. They can help you find your local service center, and then you can also sign up to get our newsletters. Every week, each office sends out a county-specific newsletter, and that's how you're going to know if like a certain program, like ECP, the Emergency Conservation Program, is being run, what the sign-up deadline is, if we're in a qualifying drought, that kind of thing. The newsletters are pretty helpful to know what's happening in the counties. And they don't just cover FSA, they cover the whole USDA as a whole, so we try to make them a little bit broader. I know that was a lot of programs fast, but I do have a lot of stuff over there, and I'm going to be here all day too, so I'm happy to answer any specific questions if people have them.
Thanks, Michael. Couple questions. We get the question often at the NBA regarding livestock indemnity program. What constitutes a weather-related event?
Good question. Let me look at my notes. LIP is one we fortunately don't have to run that often. But it doesn't have to have a disaster designation. I know that. It's not like ECP where you have to have a secretarial disaster designation in that whole process. I'm not going to read the full. So for one thing, it would have to be abnormal weather that isn't expected during that time. So I mean, if you're living somewhere where there is excessive heat every summer, I think that is, kind of factored in. They might even have specific thresholds now that I think about it. But same for, a blizzard. If for some reason the animals are out in winter and there's a blizzard, that's probably not going to be something covered. But it is a pretty wide variety of different weather events. I mean, I'm looking, there's tornado, tropical storm, volcanic eruption, winter storm, extreme heat, extreme cold. So it just has to be in excess of normal mortality. It can't be a few animals here or there, and it has to be in something you wouldn't normally expect, I believe. I hope that answered it.
Yes, it does, thank you. And then one more question, I realize you're not a loan guy, but on that beginner farmer and rancher loan program, we have a lot of our folks start through that program. But we get the question as well often, what do you consider a new producer? How much experience?
You say under 10 years. Sometimes it gets a little sticky because, maybe they've been farming on their family farm for 20 years and now they're starting a farm. And I believe what we normally default to is how their taxes have been being filed. So if someone has not been filing a Schedule F for more than 10 years, we normally categorize them as a beginning farmer. NRCS sometimes has different definitions than us. It kind of makes it a little confusing. I don't know how your guys do.
Ours is 10 years as well. For
10 years.
I think it's 7 consecutively over the last 10 filing schedule, probably last 10 filing.
Right. Yeah, so the key is that IRS farm income.
It is a self-certification too. We can't tell people how to certify themselves. People can certify how they will.
And the livestock indemnity program.
Sorry.
The livestock indemnity program, whatever covers diseases.
Wonderful question. I know cattle tick fever is one of them, I believe. Diseases that we fortunately don't really have up here. Mycoplasma bovis in bison is one. That's a new one in 2021. Any disease that is caused or transmitted by vectors and vaccinations or acceptable management practices. So, blue tongue, Theileria or entolysis. Another thing with a lot of these programs is there's something called programmatic relief. So if there's a loss condition that occurs that's reasonable, it's not a management issue, it's not something that could have been avoided, sometimes you can put in requests and still get them covered. It's not a promise, but you can basically request that your case be looked at because you feel you have an eligible loss that wasn't caused by your own management decisions, wasn't caused by something avoidable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what's FSA's definition of a vector?
Vector, I don't have a permit for that, for you, but I can look it up for you. Yeah, I'm happy to figure it out if you want. I can give you my email, you can take yours, and I can figure out a solid answer for you.
We've had this come up before because with bison, for example, malignant catarrhal fever is a virus that kills bison that they get from domestic sheep. Our sheep vector, yes, is that eligible? We've gotten a lot of pushback from LID consultation on NCS specifically.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah, there seems to be some subjectivity there.
probably intentionally vague?
Yeah.
As it is, yeah, as it is. Why would they, so they're saying because you have the sheep, that's like a management decision? That's what you
Exactly, yes. Because there are ways to kind of manage around it, even though we don't have an effective vaccination for it currently working on it. We've always argued that NCF should be a reportable disease and therefore eligible for bison under LID.
Yeah.
And if you're not carrying the lambs yourself, but there's a feedlot of them, like downwind or upwind, whatever the way the wind's blowing, it's not on you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how far you've got into the process of trying to get that covered before, but like I said, it's sometimes worth putting it in as a more formal inquiry. Like, you probably start with your local office and then go to our county committee, which I told you is how each of our offices are run, they're my supervisors. And then I can escalate to the state committee and then to DC. So that's how the hay quality thing worked last year. We had to put in a request to DC to get it implemented, and we were able to do it. So It's no promises, but it couldn't hurt to.
But that takes so much time, and you're gonna lose your animals, so they really need to be more efficient for us as bison.
I don't disagree.
Okay, well, thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Mike?
You got one back here, Mike?
Oh, just a silly question. This is all funded by the government.
Yes, all these programs are funded fully by the government.
Okay, is it state regulated? Okay. Just each state has separate.
We have different state offices. They're still federal, they're still USDA, it's not like New Hampshire oversees it. But I think somebody said intentionally the states do have some discretion in how they interpret the policy, so there is some difference whether you're working in New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, does come up. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Michael. Great. On the topic of MCF, because I know there are a few around the Northeast, I just want to give a quick update. Something the NBA has been working on. We do a lot of work in the legislative and regulatory arena, as many of you know. MCF, we've been working on a vaccine for bison for going on 12 years now. And so far, we've been pleading for funding, more support from the federal government. So some good news potentially is that we have earmarked $2 million for the next fiscal year, specifically for MCF research in bison for the vaccine development and diagnostic development. That has been included in the Senate's Ag Appropriations recommendations that they just released a week or two ago. Of course, that's going to go to the House, but we are confident that it is going to get included, that's the biggest boost of money we've had for MCF specifically ever. So members of the NBA and others, you will be getting some information from us, some campaign letters to reach out to your Congress members to encourage them to include that funding in the next appropriations bill. It's looking really positive, and I work directly with the folks developing that vaccine, and they are getting real close, and I think this could get it across the finish line. Not only that, but it would also have funding to produce the vaccine and distribute it to bison producers, because our industry is too small to rely on the market for Pfizer or Merck to go and produce that, to rely on the market because we're simply too small. So it's looking really good for federal funding there. But again, please keep an eye out in the coming months, probably in August and early September before we go to Washington. You will receive some emails from us asking you to reach out to your members of Congress again to support this funding, because it's going to be a game changer, I think, for MCF, which has been occurring in our herds for over 30 years now. So just want to mention that. Thank you, Michael. Great information. Appreciate it. Be sure to pick up some information, and your local FSA office can always assist you with your more localized questions as well. Lunch is next.
Up next we have Tabitha from NRCS, and she's going to speak on the programs and information on NRCS.
I'll keep going.
Thank you. So, yeah, I know I'm energized and ready to go after that delicious lunch. I hope you all are too. And I'll get through this session before you get that after lunch nap that you need. So, like Keira said, my name is Tabitha. Tabitha Edwards. I'm the State Outreach Coordinator for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Before being in the Outreach Coordinator role, I was a conservation planner out of the Epping, New Hampshire field office. So I was working directly with farmers, landowners, and foresters to develop conservation plans, and then work through the process of applying for financial assistance. So I've got that background and worked back in Delaware a bit, my home state, working directly with farmers as well. So very happy to take any of the technical questions you have as well. And I do not claim to know it all, none of us do, but I can find you the answers to your questions. So again, my name is Tabitha, and I'm going to share the Natural Resources Conservation Service program material with you today. So starting out, we are a federal conservation agency, and we're under the United States Department of Agriculture, just like the Farm Service Agency is. We consider each other sister agencies, and I'll get a bit more into what that relationship is like between us two agencies, which again are both under the USDA. So NRCS is unique because we are a non-regulatory agency. Our motto is helping people help the land, so we really lean on the fact that we are non-regulatory. We're not going to make you do anything. It is voluntary for you to come to us. Of course, once you're in a contract, then a contract is a contract, so both parties would be expected to uphold their sides of the contract. We've got to do what we say we're going to do as well, but I also don't want to scare you with that. We have modification procedures if things change after you already signed the contract. So again, non-regulatory, voluntary on behalf of the producer, and we're locally led, kind of similar to the Farm Service Agency with their conservation, with their local committees. We have local working groups, so that's how we're locally led. And local working groups are public meetings, so that's how it is around the whole country. So if you're interested in having more input on our programs, feel free to find your local working group meetings. Most of the time you can find them through your conservation districts. Sometimes those are called soil and water conservation districts. If you have any questions on that, happy to kind of fill you in on how your state might be different. We do have partnerships all around the state. We often partner with like University Extension, different farmer-led groups, and we provide the free technical assistance and some financial assistance. I also like to point out that we have opportunities for agriculture, forestry, producers of all different types. There's no minimum size requirement to participate in our programs. So you could be on 1/10 of an acre. It could be one small garden plot that you're interested in a high tunnel on, and there are options. So no limit on medium, large, any size topics, no matter where you are. But the focus is on privately owned lands. So publicly owned lands is a different conversation. It's not a no right from the start, but it's just a different conversation. And this is where we're located. So we have 8 offices that are NRCS offices, and I also wanted to share where Farm Service Agency is with us. So again, we do work very closely together. So in some situations, we're right in the same office. I sit in our Dover State office over here, but cover the whole state. And that's our typical structure. Every state has a state office. We're still federal employees in that state office, but direct the work of the field offices in the state. So the basics of our agency is conservation planning. We have a 9-step planning process. So it starts with things like identifying your objectives. The conservation plan is yours. So we want to make sure that we know what you want to do with your land, mid, long, and short term. And then we get into kind of what you have, inventorying of resources, providing some options for what you could do with what you have, and then also pairing that up with our technical expertise that we can offer, as well as financial assistance. And then moving through the process, then you end up implementing the plan that's best for you, maybe reevaluate how the plan might need to change, maybe apply for some financial assistance, and it can happen kind of out of order as well. You don't have to go 1 through 9. That's just a real quick overview of the process that we do follow. So our program basics, the Conservation Stewardship Program is a 5-year program that rewards producers for being a good steward of the land. So what that means is basically, it would start out with a site visit with a conservation planner, and that's free. And they'll kind of talk through what you have on your operation, what you want to do, and recommend some enhancements that we call them in that program. There's also some conservation practices that can be included too. Don't expect you to be the expert on our lingo, but that's just kind of some of the aspects of that program. And it's 5 years long, so each year you get a payment for continuing to keep up that good level of stewardship. Things like reducing tillage or going to no-till, increasing your rotational grazing, things like that, increasing wildlife habitat. And so you can get payments for each of those types of enhancements and practices, plus an existing stewardship payment of at least $4,000 per year. That's a 5-year program with option for renewal. So that's a really good one, that long-term sort of accountability to keep you doing what you want to do, and then getting rewarded for it financially, and then having us to help you along the way. The Environmental Quality Incentives Program is sort of a choose-your-own adventure. We look at the resources of soil, water, animals, plants, energy, and so those are the different pieces that we're looking at improving, and you can pick just practices that are addressing those different concerns, and it's not a 5-year program. It could spread out over 5 years, but it doesn't have to. It could be just a quick getting a high tunnel, getting some interior fencing, getting some more watering facilities, and you're not tied into a long term. There are lifespans on those practices to keep them going, but it's a more quicker way to get through a program than the Conservation Stewardship Program. You could also be in both at the same time. And we also have easement programs as well, so there's ag land easements. And I also have more info on all of these. Of course, I don't have time to really dig into each one, but I have handouts for each one. Easements are different based on ag land or wetland restoration. So with our ag land easements, we partner with certified entities within the state. In New Hampshire, it's going to be land trusts. In a different state, it could be a Department of Ag, could be land trust, could be a combination of both, or even some different types of entities. And then with wetland easements, NRCS is the easement holder. We are the largest easement holder in the nation with over 55 million acres. So we've been in the game for a little while. I'd like to say we're pretty good at it. So if you're interested, happy to chat some more. And again, I have information on all of those programs as well at the table. So program eligibility. You can own, rent, or lease land. You don't have to own it. It could be a simple written lease. It does not have to be an overly signed by a lawyer or anything like that. We really try and make these programs accessible. And so you'll have to show that kind of control of land to the Farm Service Agency to get records established. So that's one of those connecting pieces between us. And we do have some highly erodible land and wetland conversion compliance pieces that we look at. Basically, it'll be looked at by our planners or soil scientists, and if there's any issues, we work with you to get them right. So it's not meant to be anything to keep people out. It's us making sure that we are complying with all the national laws and helping you get there too. Farm records are needed with the Farm Service Agency. That's because in the background, our computers are connected, and the Farm Service Agency helps us with that type of paperwork on who you are, where you are, who else is included in your operation, just so we have those good records, because we are a federal agency, just something we have to do, but they're not going to be shared with anybody else. We do keep all that information safe. And part of the record system is Social Security number or tax identification number for your entity. There is a requirement of making less than $900,000 per year. That's adjusted gross income form. It's filled out each year. Pretty simple. Yeah, so it's basic eligibility. And again, working with the Farm Service Agency, this is just a list of the things you would need to bring with you. Again, proof of who you are, where you are. And there are some tax implications. I promise I'm almost through the boring part, and then I'm going to show you some good before and after photos. Just want to get the paperwork out of the way first. So we do cost share programs that do have some tax implications. So a 1099 or 1098 would come to you. We're not able to give tax advice directly out of our offices, but we have some good guided material that you could take to your tax staff or accountant, things like that, that can help understand how our programs would impact your business income and taxes. Okay, so cover crops is one of those major practices that we do like to recommend because it has so many great benefits for soil health, for holding in nutrients, keeping them out of water bodies and things. So this is a program that's pretty popular, or practice is pretty popular in the Environmental Quality Incentives Program and also the Conservation Stewardship Program. Varies between single species, mixed species, and different uses. We also work on some hayland management within our practices, so that very well might be something that applies to some of you all, working on your operations. And also grazing and fencing and animal water. I know that's a major thing. It's essential for your animals, so that's a way that we can help make best use of the resources you have on your operation. Of course, you're in the driver's seat. We're not going to require you to put things where you just really don't want to. It's a conversation between us and you and figuring out what's best for you. And then there's the opportunity to apply for some cost share. We have some different payment rates that are based off of economic models. So we have what are called historically underserved groups, so that's beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged, Native Americans, Asian American Pacific Islanders. I got to slow down a little bit. Also veteran farmers. And so all those different groups, they'd be eligible for a 90% cost share, but it's based off of an economic model again. So it's not always going to hit the target 100% on the percentage we're shooting for because we have a set cost list. So for example, if you're going for fencing, say fencing costs, just in this easy, clean example, say it costs $10 a foot. to actually install. So people that self-certify as historically underserved, they're going to get $9 per foot to install the fence. And then people that cannot check that box, they get $7.50 per foot. So that's sort of how our cost share works. It is a program that is applied for. It's not guaranteed funding. But right now, chances are pretty good for most of our programs because of the Inflation Reduction Act. So I do encourage people to kind of look at the options. And now's a really good time to get into our offices and get to planning on what you're interested in, because our first application batch in most states is generally early fall. So certainly start thinking now. And I have applications on our table if you'd like to work through one today. Applications are the same in every state. So that's a pretty easy one to work through. Nutrient management, of course, you all know that in your day-to-day, working with animals and all the lovely nutrients that they provide and take in. So we could assist with nutrient management planning, and then some of that infrastructure that goes with nutrient management. We do have engineers on staff, soil scientists on staff that can help support those plans, make it good for you and for the environment and your neighbors. This is a good one, animal trails. Of course, the left is what it used to look like. And then on the right, with the help of some nice engineering and soils understanding, got much cleaner, better for water quality, better for the soil structure, better for the animal health. So that's a pretty popular one. Here's a barnyard improvement. Again, very similar benefits as the previous photo, and that's right where animals and people are going to be concentrated, so it's great to have that in a condition similar to the right. And of course, these are going to depend on the site. So every site's a little different. That's why we really value our site-specific planning, and those visits are free, no cost. We come out and see you. And some more barnyard manure storage, heavy use area protection, whether that's concrete, gravel, or combination. And then we get into the manure storage, buildings and structures. We just want to keep the clean water clean and keep the nutrients in a way that they are usable and not impacting the water or the animals or you. And this one, you know, we're here talking to Bison people, but I figured you might have some gardens that you might want to extend the season on. High tunnels are kind of one of those good getting started practices with us we like to think of, because they're relatively easy to pick where they should go and get them up, get them purchased, get them installed, and you see the benefit pretty quickly. So that's an opportunity we have as well. We've also dug into the realm of energy. So energy within combustion systems. We don't provide energy sources, but we help with improving energy efficiency. And that goes throughout the whole energy operation, building envelopes, ventilation, fans, opportunities like that. And we have the option to help cost share for energy audits. So if you can pick out like a specific thing that you would like to improve, we can go down that route. But if you're not quite sure what you want to improve, we have some partners that can help give a real extensive overview of your energy and how to improve it. Again, lighting systems. I'm running a little short on time, so I'll put through the energy. Brush management, wildlife habitat, those are pretty related whenever you have livestock, maybe something you're interested in. Forest management planning, here in the second most forested state in the nation, I'd be remiss to not talk a little bit about forest management planning. So we have over 100 technical service providers that can help write those forest management plans. So NRCS can provide the cost share to write the plan, and then recommend people that can help you write the plan, because we just don't always have enough staff to do that nuts to bolts and all that time out in the field, out in the woods surveying and putting the plan together. But again, that plan is the landowner's plan. The technical service provider takes your objectives into mind the whole time writing the plan. I didn't realize this one had multiple clicks. And then after getting the plan, we can come back and help implement practices in the plan. So producers can come back and apply for cost share for things in the plan that they really want to put on the ground. Timber stand improvement, wildlife habitat, removing low value trees. Forest trails and landing is a big part of that. To do the work in the woods, you've got to be able to get in there. So that's something else we can assist with. Stream crossings. And here's our non-discrimination statement, which we include in every slideshow. Basically, like Mike said earlier, We want to make sure everyone's welcome and getting the same service as everybody else, the service that they need to take care of the land. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have. And also, we have some wonderful other NRCS staff. I have John Meadows here from our Walpole office. He's a conservation planner, resource conservationist. Damon Meeh, our state grazing specialist, and Nicole Ellis, one of our soil scientists. The last two are going to be running some afternoon sessions, so we'll be around the whole day. Happy to take any other questions that may pop up.
Are any of these programs mutually exclusive with the Climate Smart program that's being put out?
So people can participate in both as long as it's not the same exact activity on the same exact footprint. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically you can simultaneously work with NRCS EQIP, for example, and the CSA program. As Tabitha mentioned, it just can't be on the same parcel and the same practice. You can't get paid twice for the same thing. It's all first two.
Yeah, very good question.
I have two questions. The first question actually pertains to this. If we wanted to apply to put in more fencing here on the farm, who would apply for the application? Because we get a 90% cost share, they get a 7.5%, so they own the land, but I need the fencing for our bison. So who would apply? Would it be them, the farmers, or us? And how would that work? Maybe that's offline from this. That's the first question. And the second question is, if we have land already in easement, but we want to conserve or maintain, is there funding for that? It's already an easement, but like we have marshland up in Vermont or other things, we have a pond that could be used as well. So they're kind of two separate questions, so.
Yeah, I'll start with the first one. So that's sort of up to you and the landowner on who wants to apply and who wants to complete the paperwork. And as long as you have a stake in the operation, so if you work on some of the management, then you could very well be the one applying. And we would dig in more into the details of the eligibility, but we could take either avenue. And when it comes to, what was your second question?
Well, it's like say we own tribal land in Vermont that has a 68-acre pond, which has obviously got some marshland or wetlands in there. That's already a conservation easement with the land trust. But if we want to, you said you can pay to maintain or do things that are already in easement, I don't know if that's kind of stuff that would qualify if it's already in a land trust easement, but we want to maintain stuff around that pond or wetlands.
Yeah, depending on what you want to do, as long as it doesn't violate the easement, we would look at the specific practice, talk to the person that holds the easement. If NRCS holds the easement, then we'll make sure we work with our easement team. If it's a land trust or something, we'll just check with them. If it's something like adding more impervious surface, that gets a little tougher. But if it's a basic conservation practice, like wildlife habitat, a lot of times it's doable, but it would be a case-by-case consideration.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for the questions.
Do you mind if I just give a field office for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, so I work in the local field office for Cheshire and Sullivan counties. John Meadows, Tabitha already introduced me. I'm a conservation planner, so I'd be the person that you talk to when you want help from NRCS. So the typical process is you call the office, you say, I need help, and we come out and do a visit. So let's say Brian and Keira, they're like, we are having trouble managing our pasture land because we don't have fencing or a watering system to support better prescribed grazing or grazing management that improves the land, which is what NRCS wants to do. We want to improve the land. So what we do is we come out, we address their concerns, and we figure out a way to make our practices fit what they want to do to better the land and obviously make the farm more viable. And so let's say we come up with some ideas and we're like, yeah, we're going to fence in these two pastures and we're going to put in a watering system for that. That's their conservation plan. And so we take that conservation plan, we bring it back to the office, we maybe draft it up a little bit or give it back to them and say, hey, if you like this, then you apply. And when they apply, they go to Farm Service Agency and they get their farm records set up with FSA, like Mike. So they would go to Mike and they would say, hey, this is my land, this is who I am, this is my operation. They show proof that they're owning and operating the land. And you can think of it as like creating an account with USDA. So once they get that established, they apply, and then we take that application, their conservation plan, and we submit it for funding. So when we submit it for funding, it's a competitive process through ranking. We have a lot of money right now, so it's not very competitive. And then if it gets pre-approved, we come back and we finalize the documents for them, and it'll have a contract. And your contract says you're going to do this much fencing, and this is your cost share for it. You're going to do it here by this date, by March 2025, whatever. And if you like that, you sign the contract, and then your contract starts. And then once you do the practice, we reimburse you for the fixed rate that's in the contract.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. Any more questions generated? All right, thanks for your time and attention. I'll turn it over to Jim.
All right, next we are going to switch it up a little bit and liven things up after lunch. I commend Tabitha for handling the post-lunch presentation. We're going to do a little fun auction. We have here with us Mr. Seaman of Quality Auction Services, who is the premier bison auctioneer in our industry. Judd came all the way over here from South Dakota, and we would be remiss if we didn't take advantage of his talents and also showcase his amazing auctioneering opportunities for folks like yourself who don't get to see an auctioneer perform like Judd can here. So we've just got a few items that we would like to auction off today to raise a little money for this conference that will support the National Bison Association and the Eastern Bison Association to offset some of the expenses we're incurring here putting this thing together today. So I'll need a couple of Vanna Whites here. I know I've got one and my daughter Ruby. If Ruby wants to come up and carry around some of the items here. This is on the fly as usual, as we usually do things here. So we've got my wife's clerking. Yep, she'll be jumping down. Who's buying what? It's a family operation, that's right. So we have just a few items here. Keira, if you could help us out, go get that from Keira. And these items are donated by Pitcher Mountain Farms here, so we sure appreciate them contributing, as well as the National Bison Association and Blue Seal. And at some point I would like to have Nick come up and speak to the mineral tub that he's donating here, so maybe before we do that one last, he could do that. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Judd Seaman.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, Judd?
I'm not used to holding way out there, so I may get a little loud before we get done here. So, what do you got to start with? This is a medium. It says Eat Wild from Yankee Farmers Market. Everybody, is there anybody here that has never been to an auction before? Get your hands up. See how this is how it works. So when I ask for a number and you like the number, you put your hand in the air. That's how it works, so I can do that. So, all right, we're going to start with this t-shirt. It's medium, and I need $10 bill. Somebody give 10, bid 10, not 15, not 20, not 5, bid 20, $5 bid, now 25, bid $25 bid, yeah, it's you, 25, I got 20 from it, I need 25 from you, bid $25 bid, $20 bid, now 25, 25, got 10, 20, now 5, bid $25 bid, $25, sold, $20, add 2 seal, $20, add 2 seal. What do we got next? Ruby. Jim, you gotta let us know what we're selling. Do we just grab something or what?
Sweatshirt.
What's that?
That's a sweatshirt. Ruby's got it.
Sweatshirt. Grab a sweatshirt. Here we go. What size is that?
It's medium, but we have other sizes if you want to swap it.
Can we swap it for one that fits a real man like me?
That can be tough.
Can we do that, Keira?
We have.
Do you have other sizes?
We have large, we have, yeah, just come back here and look, swap.
Okay, they'll swap it for whatever size fits you back there. Somebody get 20 for this deal. Bid 20. Bid 10, $10, $10, and $15, $15, $15, $15, now 20, 20, 20, 15 here, now $20, $5, $5, 25. Bid 25, bid 30, now $5, bid now 35, bid 35, 35. Your turn, sir. Bid 35, now 40, 40, 35, 40, now 5. Bid 40, $5, bid now 45. Bid 45, 45, 40, bid now $5, bid now 45, 45, 45. Bid 45, bid now 50, bid 50, 50, 50, 45, 50. Bid $50. I'll check with your wife. Bid 50, now 5. Bid 50, $5, bid now 55. Bid 55. You got to check with yours too. You look like you've been married for about 50 years. Bid 55. I'm 55, 60. bid $65 bid now 65, bid $65 bid now 65, 65, 65, sold at $60, Garrett Star. You know what we're going to do? We're going to sell you a choice. You can either have a Born to be Wild from Yankee Farmers Market or a National Bison Association cap, or if you really feel inclined for twice the money, you can own them both. So that's what we're going to do. We're selling you choice. $10. Let's go. Bid 10. Bid 10. Little bit down 10. Bid 15. Another 15. Now 20. 20. 25. Little bit down 25. Bid 25. Now 30. Bid 30. Bid 30. 30. 25. Bid. It's your turn at 30. Now 5. Bid 35. Another bid 35. Now 40. Bid 40. 40. 35. 40. Now 5. Bid 45. Little bit now 45. Sir, this is just like playing checkers. Every other turn it's your turn. That's how it works. So I need 45 from you. I got 40 there. I need 5 from you. 45. Bid 45. Another bid 45. You want to be 45? I got 40 here now. 5. Another bid now 50. Bid 15. Another bid 15. Another bid 5. Bid 15. 5. Another bid now 55. Bid 15. 5. Another bid sold. $50. What's the name?
Ginger. Ginger.
I can't hear you. Ginger. You want one or both?
One.
Which one?
The not the Yankee one, the other one.
You want the NBA hat?
Yes, I do.
I went through, that was the best one. I still got the Born to be Wild. You want to be 10 on it? Now 20, now 30, now 40, now 50, 45, 45, 45, now 50, 45, 50, now 5, bid 50, 5 dollar bid now 55, 55, 55, bid 55, dollar bid 55, 55, 55, sold $50, Gary Starr. You can hold that up. Are you sure you want to do this? What's the story? Do we have a story with this?
This is the story of Pitcher Mountain Farm 2024 NBA Conference.
Oh, it's marked and everything. On the skull. Somebody give $100 for it. Give 100. Boy, that thing's bright when it shines in your eyes. Somebody give 100. Somebody give 25. Let's do that. 25, 50. Now 75. Bid 75. Now 1. Bid $100. Get 125, 25, 50. Dollar down 175. Now 200. Get 200. 25, 25, 50. Dollar down 2.5, 75 and 3. Bid $300. Get 25, 25. Now 50. Dollar down 3.5, 350. Now 4. Bid 450. Bid 450. Dollar down 450. Now 5. Bid 500. Bid 550. Now 600. 606 and 6 and 5. Bid 6. Bid 600. Now 25. Bid 600 and 25. 25. Are you sure? 625. Anybody else? 625. I sold it. $600. Matthew Copperthorn's our buyer. Are we mineral? Mick, come on up and talk to us about this little mineral bucket we're going to sell.
David, lift it up.
So it's a pre-choice mineral for the last 4 to 6 weeks of pregnancy for the cows when they're due to birth. We have other ones with fly control as well, not with us today, but they're available. And then there's a bunch of minerals, alfalfa cubes, and deer nuts, and that's a feed, by the way.
So we're going to do it all as one package.
No, I think you could split it up.
You think we should split it up? So how many different items do we have? Is there 4?
Was it 250 pound mineral tub?
Yeah, do that one.
Okay, they want me to do the tub first. It's a 250 pound tub. And what is it?
It's minerals, distillers, grains, and vitamins. So it's free choice. They can only eat about a pound a day. And it's what we advise is to feed the whole about pasture, set it down into a truck tire, put a little lanyard around it, and then you can tow it around from pasture to pasture when you're moving your animals around, rotational grazing.
There's a plan and everything. I don't know if it's NRCS approved, but it's a plan. All right?
I get tired of it.
On the tub, somebody give $100 for it. Bid 100. Somebody give 25. Bid $25, him 25. Bid 25, now $50, him $50, him $75 bid now, $75 now, $100 bid, $100 him one. Bid $100 him $100 bid, $100, $175 here, now $85, $85, now $100 bid, $100. Bid $100 him $100, $185 bid now, $100 him $100, $100 down one. I sold it, $85 at 2CO. And I'm assuming someone will help you load that. I don't want to see you try to load it in, and I sure as hell don't want her to. Next item.
It's a 50-pound bag of wildlife grain.
50-pound bag of wildlife grain. What is that worth? Roughly $50?
Depends if the fish and wildlife catcher for feeding the deer.
Oh, is that against the law over here?
Not here in Vermont, it is.
Oh, well. So right here it is. Wildlife game, somebody give $50 for it. Somebody give 10. Bid 10, $10, bid 10, $10, oh, buffalo or wildlife. You can feed it to your buffalo or your bison. Somebody give 10, $10, bid 10, $10, $10, bid 10, $10, $10, bid now $10, $15, $15, $15, $15, $15, $10, $15, bid $15, $15, $15, $15, $10, $15, $15, sold $10. Add 2 COs to buy it. Add 2 COs to buy it. We have one more?
I'll put it over here.
You got one more, Nick?
Two bags of alfalfa cubes.
So do these fit in a grass-fed program? There's no grain in them whatsoever? Okay. Alfalfa cubes, 2 bags. You buy 1 or buy 2 of them. Somebody get 50 for them. Pick 25. Bid 25, now 30, 30, 30, 25, bid now 30, now 40, 40, 40, 30, bid now 1, bid now 35. 30's here, now 5, 35, bid now 5, bid 40, 40, 40, 35, bid now 40, 40, 40, another bid now 40, 40, 35, 40. Bid 40, 40, 40, 35, bid now 40, 40, sold. $35 and 2 CO. You want them both? 2 times the money. Is that it? Thank you. All of you that were here participating, thank you very much. And here's Nick.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And we did acquire the 6 Kelly Agway stores in Walpole, Brattleboro, and all Keene. So please feel free to come in for stores and introduce yourselves if you're here.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate your generosity. Thank you to the farmers for your donations as well. And thank you, Judd, for doing a quick auction for us here. That was a lot of fun. Next up, we do our panel Q&A with Tabitha, Daimon, Brian, Keira, Nicole, Callie, Chief Don, and Carl. We're having you ask any question that you want for these folks that you haven't asked them yet here. If you don't have any questions, we'll try and pepper some as well here. But we just want to have a conversation, open conversation, ask any questions that you'd like from these great presenters that we've heard from today. But first, yeah, let's just do a quick round of introductions here. I'll just hand the mic and you can pass it on down the line.
Hello, I'm Brian Farmer. Pitch Mountain Farm, Yankee Farmers Market, West Roots.
Keira.
Don Stevens, Chief of the Noligan Abenaki Tribe.
Carl Majewski with UNH Extension here in Cheshire County and part of the dairy and livestock team with Extension.
Lucey with Land for Good.
Tabitha Edwards, Natural Resources Conservation Service. Nicole Ellis, also with the NRCS. I'm the soil scientist for the state.
I'm Daimon Meeh with New Hampshire NRCS. I'm the state grazing specialist here.
All right, great. I will start off with a question myself, focused on the NRCS folks. As I mentioned, EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, has been a tremendous help to a lot of bison producers out there. The problem that we have is that it's perpetually running out of funding before all of our folks can get through the application process to get funded for various projects that they're undergoing there. So 2 questions for you. Any tips on how to get ahead of the line or to secure funding a little bit better? And what infrastructure projects specifically do you think would be helpful that you can provide to bison producers in this area?
I can take a crack at that. So unfortunately, some of the answer is it depends on, in terms of like getting your project to get to the front of the line, that depends a little bit on your local area. There are local working groups that help set priorities, and that has implications on the rankings of those particular projects. And so if you do want to get involved, you could get involved in the local working group that then sends that feedback back to the states that could then help the projects for bison producers to rank higher. I don't know if that's a new idea for you or not, but that's one way. The other way is to try and add a few more extra things on top of so there may be the things that you want to do, and then maybe there's some extra things that you could do for wildlife or stuff like that to kind of add in a little bit of extra to those ranking points. It again depends on your local area and what those local priorities are. So I can't give a a super clear answer on that, but I think that getting involved with your local working group, and if you don't know how to do that, get in touch with your local office, your field office, and talk to them and find out when those dates are, and they have a meeting to get that feedback. In terms of projects, about a year ago, there were some new options in terms of fence that were being offered that are a little bit more bison, elk, deer focused, taller fences, and a higher payment rate as a result of that, just because of more materials. So again, there can be variations state to state in what is offered in terms of those, we call them scenarios. So whether it's like a 96-inch tall fence or a 2-strand high tensile fence, those are 2 different scenarios, under our fence practice. And so depending on the state, and again, feedback at a local working group could bring this into your state. There are new scenarios that are more focused on, wild game animals being raised. So I think those are some options just to be aware of. Yep. I want to make sure, I think I covered all your questions.
I want to add just a little bit to the first question, getting started early. We have application batching deadlines, so we can make sure we can work through the ranking process and then get contracts drafted up. So please start working with conservation planners in your local office now if you can. As I mentioned earlier, most states are going to do their first batch application deadline in early fall. But if you wait until then to apply, we just don't know all that you have going on to be able to offer you the full suite of practices. It takes some time. And then also, where people designate if they're part of a historically underserved group, that's on that original application. And some people miss that. It's a self-designation, and sometimes that will increase your ranking points or make you eligible for different ranking pools. So that's beginning farmers, farming less than 10 years, veteran farmers released from service within the last 10 years, limited resource farmers, and that's based off of income for the individual, the farm, based off of basically the economy in the area. We have a calculator to figure that out. And then socially disadvantaged groups, Native Americans, Black, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic. And so those are some of those categories to think of too that can help people get into the funding.
when you say ranking points, is there a guideline out there of what those ranking points are?
I guess the question is, you talk about ranking points. Is there a guideline of what those ranking points are? So if you look at it and say, oh, well, I want to put fencing in, but if I had, you talked about wildlife, that gets me, 10 extra points. Is there something out there that the producer like us would know to look at to help us kind of guide that, or is that something talking with you guys?
So a lot of our ranking now is geospatial based off of soils, waters, watersheds. So our ranking system is going to automatically answer a lot of those. And then we have some key priority practices that if that's included in the application package, that's going to bring up the ranking a bit. So actually even as planners, we don't have a lot of that kind of manipulation ranking. John, is there anything you want to add since you're active in ranking right now?
I mean, there's a lot of different factors that go into it.
Give him the mic, Jim, please, thanks.
So there's a lot of different factors that go into it, but a lot of it comes down to what problems are on your farm and then what are you doing to solve them. So if you've got a million problems that we've identified, but you only want to say do fence to solve one or two of your problems, your project might rank lower than something as if than something else where you might pick up a ton of other practices. So let's say you just want to do fence, you don't want to rotationally graze, you don't want to do any livestock watering, you don't want to do any wildlife. That's going to rank lower than a project that does have those practices in because they're addressing more problems. Also put in something for the Inflation Reduction Act. So we have a lot more money coming in that is available for programs like EQIP and CSP through the Inflation Reduction Act. It's kind of a separate pool of money, but we get to use it on our same programs. And those are called climate smart ag and forestry practices that fit under that program. And so there's a list of them over there, but picking from that list and making sure that your project is including climate smart practices, it exponentially raises your chances of getting funded because the funds are so much more available.
And grazing management is one of those practices.
I have a question. One day I was reading an article in the paper, and they were they had grants to put new waterers on your farm. I raise bison, and I called up the field office, and they immediately came down. But all this requires a farm plan. Now, I had never heard of a farm plan before. So they did the farm plan for us. And out of that farm plan, and I'm going to tell you a strange story, we had a lottery on Long Island to get rid of 6 farms that were part of the Lilco nuclear power plant they were going to build on Sound Avenue. And they, and the farming, there's not that many farms on Long Island, but I entered that lottery, and I won the farm because I had extra points from doing a farm plan. I don't know if any of you ever heard of it, but I didn't hear either, but because of that, I ended up with a farm. And I have a big farmhouse with it. So.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
All right, other questions for the group? Okay, I'm full of them, so I can keep going. Kale, for leasing ground, that's a relatively new concept for Bison. We've always done a little bit. It's becoming more mainstream now as we become more mainstream. Oftentimes when there was leased ground up, we would just get a no because Bison tear up fences and all those stereotypes that are untrue when managed correctly. But from your perspective, do you have any, for folks that are looking to lease some ground, any tips on how you approach these landowners or convincing arguments we can make, etc.? We always say how good Bison are for the land and all that, but from your perspective, is there anything that we can do to make that more feasible?
It's a great question, and the communications are always the hardest part of all of this. I think really coming in, asking them questions is a great way to start, and asking them what their goals for the land are, what they want to see happen to it, and going from there you can start building a relationship and start letting them know what your intentions are, and coming from it from that perspective allows you a bit more of a foundation than coming in saying, I want to do this, this is, these are my goals, which can be a bit more aggressive. So we find that you can get a little bit further. Also, then providing education for them. There are incentives to landowners to want to lease land. You can put it in current use taxation status. If it's being used for agriculture, they get tax breaks. They can get easements put on the land and a whole bunch of funding for various projects like what we've just been hearing about. So you can form a team with the landowner if you're coming from a place of asking questions and communication. And as far as bison in particular, if you have information about what bison actually do, now that it is becoming more mainstream, being able to show like this is land that has been degraded and then this is land that's been improved after running bison on it, or showing increased soil fertility.
You say this is the life of the project, and if you stop before then you had to pay that money back or some sort of graduated. Is that still the case? Or I just want to, because we're talking about leasing land and other things, or working with other landowners who may not be aware of this bison, and we couldn't get some because some of the landowners would only agree to a year at a time, and we couldn't ever get it because they said it's not long enough. So.
I don't know that I have the answer to all of that question, but I will say that landowners can be afraid to give long-term leases, and I know that there are certain programs, whether or not they're the ones that you're speaking about specifically, I'm not sure, and maybe you all have more information, but but trying to get the landowner comfortable after you've been there for an introductory period, and they're getting more used to what you're doing, then it's a good time to try and have a conversation about applying for programs that are going to require a longer term lease. And there are ways to present a longer term lease in a way that's going to be more comfortable for them. Like if it's a 5-year grant program or something, you can offer up a 5-year rolling lease or a 3-year rolling lease that might, if you put it in terms that are going to work for a grant program, you might be able to get around some of that.
Do you recall if it was EQIP or CSP?
I think it was like a working lands grant where you could put in fencing, and they said the life of the fence would be 5 years, and if they were paying for the fencing, you had to have agreements with the landowners for 5 years, or else there was a graduated payment. I think they said 3 years, then there's a payback of those 2 years because. So I think it was a USDA or working land through NRCS. It was one of those working land grants or something like for fencing in our case.
Yeah. It sounds like it was one of those old specialized projects under the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which that's okay to not have all the specifics, but for things like fencing now, you just have to have control of the land when you apply. We're not looking for any long-term, if it's like a conservation stewardship program that is a 5-year program, we'll just verify that you have control of the land each year when we pay, but when you initially apply, you don't have to have that long-term ownership, or control I should say, not even just ownership.
Great, thank you. Nathan, I'm going to put you on the spot. You were asking me a question last night about encroaching fescue that I could not answer.
Oh, yeah.
This is a great group of folks to ask that question.
Great, thank you, Jen. So I'm at Virginia Bison Company in Northern Virginia, and it's been there for 25 years. I've only been there for 8 months, but I'm told that we tried to introduce like native prairie grasses from the Midwest and the West, but that eastern fescue is on all of the properties around us, which are all cattle operations, and that within a matter of a couple of years, all those introduced grasses are smothered and outcompeted by the fescue. So we just gave up entirely. All our fields are either eastern fescue or weeds, and eastern fescue does not really have the nutritional profile that we like, so we have to supplement, and it's just unfortunate. Do you have thoughts on that problem?
I mean, Carl, I don't know if you have anything, I can take a shot at it too, but you're welcome to.
Well, so the question is, any thoughts about how to manage creeping or fescue you would,
Yes.
okay.
Prevents it smothering out other species of mice.
No. I mean, in general, I think, you know, when you have a grass that you're managing as a pasture that performs as a grass well in a pasture, then it's always going to be challenging. So the way that fescue spreads, the way that it tolerates grazing, is going to make it difficult to manage compared to some of the other methods that we use for managing other weeds in pastures, like mowing management, close grazing, or herbicide use or something like that. If it was a bad enough problem, it might be the sort of thing that you'd have to kind of renovate, do a total renovation of the field altogether. That's kind of an extreme option. That's something that, when I work with farms, I kind of try to avoid that unless it's absolutely necessary. But that might be one of those times. So, and hoping Daimon has something better. But
so first, is making no presumption of the management, but the native warm season grasses need to be managed very differently than cool season grass like fescue. So longer residual, much taller residual for those native warm season grasses that are like common prairie grasses, and then also generally a longer recovery time, a little bit longer recovery time, and so if that switch in management wasn't made coming from fescue, what they were used to, or what you folks were used to with managing the fescue, if that adjustment in management wasn't made, then additional stress would have been put on those native warm season grasses and then allowed that fescue back in potentially. So I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but that is a potential case. Really a lot of those native warm season grasses like to have 10 to 12 inches of residual left when you move the animals off. Because a lot of the energy is stored in the crowns of the plant above ground. That may have played into it. Also, those grasses can take a little while to get established. So if, even a couple of years where you really can't use that area for grazing so that it can actually grow and get established. So if that wasn't done, then those grasses wouldn't have had an opportunity to get really strongly established, again, opening the opportunity for the fescue to come back in. So not sure if either of those two things happened, but just two management considerations when thinking about those warm season grasses.
Susie had a question.
If you spray a pasture with 2,4-D, how long do you have to wait before you can put the bison back on the graze?
So for 2,4-D, I always say check the label. It'll say right there what the grazing restriction is. I don't have the label memorized. I think for lactating cattle or for or for animals that are going to market, it's like 30 days. Did everyone hear that, or do you need me to say it again? Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did, but I've read everything on the internet, and it's ranged from 24 hours to 30 days. And it's a little frustrating.
So
30 days is kind of impractical.
30 days is impractical?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it may not be practical, but in most states, the label is the law. And so you need to follow those restrictions that are on the label. There may be other instances, if you're harvesting it for hay or something like that, where that restriction is much less, and it may only be 24 hours. But for grazing restrictions, it may be different. It's just follow the label.
So by the label, so looking online, you may find different like you said, you may find different things. Written on the label that comes with that herbicide, it will have those restrictions on there. And so that's what you're supposed to follow, as opposed to
the other stuff that you find online. So that's in theory the scientifically backed withholding time that you need to have that's put on the label. They are required to do scientific tests to know how long that withholding time is. So the label, you can find it online, but to make sure it's the exact same product, it's best to look at the label that came on the chemical.
Does 2,4-D kill spotted knapweed? Is that a broadleaf?
Spotted knapweed is a broadleaf. I don't know if it's listed on the label for 2,4-D or not. It could be. But the plants that it is appropriate for are also listed on the label. So it's full of, that label is full of information.
Great, thanks guys. I'm not going to let Brian and Keira off the hook, so one more question for these guys and we'll move on to our field tours here. But Brian and Keira, you do a lot of processing, meat processing on your business here, and that is always a challenge for us bison producers. We've always been in a bottleneck for processing with bison, I always say, but you seem to be pretty darn good at it. Do you have any tips or suggestions on how folks can maintain good relations with their processors and get animals in a timely manner?
Certainly a bottleneck and a challenge, and especially if you're getting into farming, it's a challenge. Hopefully we'll have some more people that want to volunteer and get into it. Anyone? Any takers? But yeah, it's been a challenge for sure. We typically use 3 or 4 different meat processors or slaughterhouses, which are anywhere from 2 to 3 hours away from us because of that, and it's just timing. What I would suggest is putting dates on the schedule. You can often cancel them, or at least delay them, but it's really hard to get them. So I know like beginning farmers will go in and be like, oh, I have an animal ready next week, and they call the meat processor. Well, we're about a year to a year and a half out on booking. So developing that relationship with a meat processor early, and then just trying to ballpark what you think your needs might be in the future is really an important thing to do. Also network with other local farms. As I was mentioning to the cook farms here, oftentimes because I'm trying to figure out what I need for 2025, December 2025 is already booked, right? So, so just trying to kind of over predict what I need, and oftentimes that frees up some space. So I'm happy to work some animals in or offer a slaughter date over to somebody. So if you can kind of network with other local farmers in that way, that can work. Bison doesn't require the federal inspection, so depending on what you're doing, you could just go through, you know, a local meat processor to do that with beef and whatnot. It's a little different, but so there's a couple different options in that way. And you know, I would say probably the biggest thing is just get with somebody who's done it a lot and pick their brain. Yep. So you have anything to add? Yeah.
Sure, I'll add plenty. You know, a big advice is make it easy for them. Do what you say. Don't miss a slaughter date. You know, work with them. You know, there's times of the year when they are not busy, and they value your business. Don't be a pain in the ass. You know, and then also, they are doing a service. However, there's a lot of education that goes along with it. If you can help the process, it makes it, it starts off the right foot when you show up there on time, if not early. Work with the guys. You know, act like it's a fragile relationship. It's not always right, but it is kind of the secret to the sauce. Help the guys in the back. It's kind of like when you work with a business. the lady that answers the phone is the gatekeeper for the business. And so the guys in the back are the same way. And you can make friends or you can make enemies and not get slaughter dates anymore. Little tips and tricks of, just, leave no sign when you leave, like don't make a mess, or be willing to do whatever they need. If they need you to hold the ladder, hold the ladder. Like those are some of those little things. And then work with office people, the same thing, and pay your bills.
I just want to mention something, at least in Vermont. I have 2,000 citizens that I feed. So part of the USDA, I don't want to say loophole, is that if you are having your own personal consumption, it doesn't have to go to a USDA meat inspection plan. So we have ours processed right on the farm, like you saw with our slide. So we hire someone for 150 bucks, come out and, and quarter them, and then we bring them to any butcher that's available. So if you're selling retail, that's a whole different ballgame. But if you're selling, like up in Vermont, if you're selling, if you're consuming it yourself, or if it's going through a farmer's market, not a retail store or not a restaurant, then we can do it on farm. And I don't know if that's if that's the same for any state. You'd have to check into that. I don't know. I know Vermont. But also some of the other people, what we see in Vermont, they actually sell the person the animal live, and then they arrange the slaughter, and then it's their own personal consumption. Like if they want a whole bison or a whole cow, they sell it to me, and then I arrange the slaughter, and then we consume it. So that's kind of a way that we do it. Like if I buy a whole cow, and then I arrange the slaughter, then it's personal consumption because I own it. Instead of them selling me the meat, they sell me the whole animal because that's legal. So anyway, I just wanted to say, that's in Vermont. I don't know about here, but I don't know how many people use it more for themselves or for retail or what else, but.
Great point. Thank you, Don. Good, we're gonna break here in just a minute. One more thing, well, first let's hear for a round of applause for our panel here. And then, real quick, I just want to mention that agritourism is a very nice value-added opportunity for the bison business. And we're fortunate to have Harvest Host here with us. I was going to have Jesse come up and just say a quick word about what Harvest Host does. It's a growing opportunity in the bison business, again, a good value-added opportunity in agritourism. So Jesse, if you don't mind, maybe just say a couple words about what you guys do.
Absolutely, thanks Jim. I'm not a sponsor here today, we're just an attendee. We've been pretty involved with the NBA over the last few years, but this is our first EBA event. So I'm sure a lot of you have been getting emails from us for the last few weeks. I sent one out 2 days ago, so you might have even seen that. But anyways, for any of you that don't know about Harvest Host, we basically connect RV travelers with different small businesses across the US and Canada. And farms and ranches are our most popular type. So we have about 6,000 host locations. Almost half of them are farms and ranches. And bison ranches have become some of our most popular destinations. It just feels like kind of a natural fit for the program. It's a great way to generate some additional revenue and cash flow, like Brian and Keira said, are so important to kind of making it in this industry. It's much easier than most people think. The main kind of pushback we get from people is that we don't have enough to offer, which typically isn't true. All you really need is kind of a flat spot for an RV to park, and then something to offer them. So if you're just selling meat online, that even works. People will buy it from you, have it shipped to their home, so when they're done with their travels, it's there waiting for them. They love that. Or if you have a setup like this, obviously this is ideal for just about anybody, but anything in between works. We are a free program, so you don't have to pay us anything at all. We build a profile for you, and then you kind of run it like an Airbnb. So you set your rental calendar, you can host as little or as much as you want, and then people come to your location, stay overnight in their RV, and then spend money at your location. So if you're just starting out and just need a kind of a little boost in revenue, or you're just trying to keep things flowing well at your location that's been around for a long time, it could be a really good option for you. So please come chat with me if you've got any questions. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jesse. Well, they're not a sponsor of this particular event. They've been a great partner overall in supporting the National Bison Association. So thank you, Harvest Host, for your continued support. I'm glad you're here, Jesse. Okay, great. Well, we're going to move on to the field tours next. And can you speak to the process there, Keira?
So we're going to break into smaller groups, and we're going to have 3 different groups. Brian and I are going to do a facilities tour. Carl is going to be out in the back here doing a tour, and then Daimon and Nicole will be across the street. If you can, try to break up into 3 different groups. We'll probably have one here, one there, and one across the street to start. We're going to go for 45, 50 minutes, and then do a little swap. It is walking, so if you need a hand with that, if you want us to use the quota, and have you be part of that, that's great. If you want to hang out here, you can go hang out under the tree, that's welcome too. Brian and I are going to try to do a driving tour, so we'll load you guys up in our vehicles and take you for a little bit of tour around, pitch around, but also parts of Andorra. So if we can get that done, that'd be great. And then when we come back, we'll just do a little bit of closing here, and then we're shuttling up to the mountain, which is about half a mile down the road is a parking lot. It's limited parking, so if you guys could carpool, that would be great. But also, we have about 3 different vehicles that we can shuttle you. If you want to do a short hike, it's about 10 minutes, and it's on a road and then in a field. So it's not rough terrain, really. If you wanted to do that, you could do that. Otherwise, we can shuttle you right to the top as well. So happy to do that. There are no bathroom facilities. I think there might be a porta potty right in the parking lot area.
Bottom in the parking lot.
That's locked.
The nearest tree maybe enough.
But it might be the green bathroom up there. So, but just come talk to me if you need anything. We're happy to accommodate and get you all up there. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Great, thanks.